Good day, grade 11 learners, and welcome to this video where we will be revising the topic which is based on human impact on the environment, which you should be studying for your paper 2 of your final exams. Please note that this topic will be revised using questions from section B that has been taken from past exam papers. Some of the important concepts that you need to remember with regards to human impact on the environment is as follows. The first subtopic in this section that was focused on was atmosphere and climate change. We then looked at water availability and water quality, food security, loss of biodiversity, and lastly solid waste disposal. These were the 5 subtopics which were touched on in human impact on the environment. The first question that we'll look at is taken from a 3.1 that says read the passage below and answer the questions that follow. SA wonder plant removes more carbon dioxide than Amazon. Speckworm is our own indigenous wonder plant found in the Eastern Cape and is an important weapon in the fight against climate change. The speckworm is 10 times more effective than the Amazon rainforest at sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. It is especially good at photosynthesis, which produces a byproduct we desperately need. Kuzuko Lodge, a private game reserve next to Addo Elephant National Park, is able to sell carbon credits due to this miracle bush which occurs naturally there. Governments in Europe want to reduce industrial pollution and tax companies heavily for excess carbon emissions. Therefore, businesses that produce high levels of greenhouse gas emissions, like transport companies, can buy carbon credits to offset their carbon footprint. The first question, 3.1.1, says why do companies in Europe want to reduce their carbon footprint? So why do companies in Europe want to reduce their carbon footprint? So firstly, they are heavily taxed on high carbon emissions that would have been stated somewhere in the passage. That is the reason as to why companies want to reduce their carbon footprint, because they are heavily taxed for high carbon emissions. 3.1.2 says describe 3 ways in which an individual can reduce their carbon footprint. So 3 ways to reduce your carbon footprint. You would have learned about this in the topic on atmosphere and climate change. So firstly, you can drive less in motor vehicles using petrol and diesel as fuel, and you can walk or cycle instead of driving. You could also reduce the use of electrical appliances. You could switch off unnecessary appliances. You could reduce the burning of wood and coal, as when you burn fossil fuels such as coal, it's going to increase the amount of carbon emissions that you release into the atmosphere, and thereby increasing the carbon footprint, because the carbon footprint refers to the total amount of carbon emissions released into the atmosphere as a result of human activity. The next question, 3.1.3, says how would selling carbon credits to European companies benefit the environment at Kuzuko Lodge? So how would selling carbon credits to European companies benefit the environment at the Kuzuko Lodge? So if you see here, it says the Kuzuko Lodge, a private game reserve next to Addo Elephant National Park, is able to sell carbon credits due to its miracle bush which occurs naturally there. So firstly, the money earned could be used to conserve the natural environment. So the money that was earned from selling that carbon credits could be used to conserve the natural environment. 3.1.4, explain how increased carbon dioxide emissions can have a negative effect on the environment for 5 marks. This question is extremely important. Please ensure that you are able to answer something like this. I'm going to repeat the question. Explain how increased carbon dioxide emissions have a negative effect on the environment. So firstly, high levels of carbon dioxide trap more heat in the Earth's atmosphere. This causes an enhanced greenhouse effect. The enhanced greenhouse effect will cause global warming. This in turn causes climate change. You can have change in the Earth's weather patterns, and this will cause a change in rainfall patterns, and temperatures will also start to increase as well. Ultimately, it could lead to a loss of biodiversity. So we can start losing our plants and animals that make up the environment. I'm going to go through 3.1.4 again. High levels of carbon dioxide trap more heat in the Earth's atmosphere, causing the enhanced greenhouse effect. The enhanced greenhouse effect is what causes global warming. This will cause the climate to change. It will cause a change in rainfall patterns as well as increasing temperatures. Ultimately, it could lead to the loss of biodiversity. 5 points for 3.1.4 would give you 5 marks. The next question, 3.2, states a scientist tested 2 sites along a river. Site A was situated upstream and site B was situated downstream. So we have a river, but site A was upstream and site B was downstream. She measured 3 factors at each site: oxygen content, water temperature, and percentage algae. So 3 factors: oxygen content, water temperature, and percentage algae. If we look at the sites in the table, you have site A and site B. You have your dissolved oxygen in arbitrary units, water temperature in degrees Celsius, and then you have your algae as a percentage. You can see that the values in the table are different compared to, if you compare site A with site B. If we look at question 3.2.1, it says use the data in the table to formulate a hypothesis to explain the differences in water temperature and percentage of algae at site A and site B for 2 marks. Remember that formulating a hypothesis is simply stating a prediction of what you expect to happen in the investigation. In this case, you're explaining the relationship between water temperature and percentage of algae. So here's your water temperature, there's your percentage of algae. Here you are going to have sites A and site B. If you look at the water temperature, it's increasing from 16 to 19. The percentage of algae also increases from 5 to 26. Therefore, we could simply say that high water temperature stimulates algae growth. You could also say as the temperature increases, the percentage of algae is also going to increase. 3.2.2 says name 1 human influence that could be causing the rise in water temperature. What could possibly be causing the temperature in the water to rise? Humans are constantly engaging in certain types of activities, especially when they're going to be working in factories. They will pollute the environment with a certain type of pollution referred to as thermal pollution. You could also say pollution from the industry. 3.2.3 says which phenomenon could occur if the percentage of algae continues to increase at site B for 1 mark. If the percentage of algae continues to increase here, from 26 it continues to go up. What phenomenon could occur? When your percentage of algae starts to increase so much that it eventually covers the entire river, then the phenomenon will be referred to as eutrophication. 3.2.4 says describe the process which caused the phenomenon mentioned in question 2.3.2. 3.2.3. So this question is for 4 marks. You are describing it. So you need to give a detailed description. You are describing the process of eutrophication. Very important, you need to know this. So firstly, nitrogen-rich compounds in fertilizers are going to blow with the use of the wind and they're going to land themselves inside a river, lake, dam or ocean. It's going to cause the formation of algae or algal bloom, which will decrease the amount of light coming into the water. As a result, the plants are going to die out because the rate of photosynthesis will start slowing down. It will increase the amount of bacteria that decomposes these plants, which leads to a decrease in the amount of oxygen that is used up by the bacteria. Other aquatic organisms such as fish are going to all die out due to a lack of oxygen, and the entire area is going to become a dead zone. I'll go through that process again. The process of eutrophication. Firstly, nitrogen-rich compounds and fertilizers are going to blow with the use of the wind into rivers, lakes, dams, and oceans. It's going to increase the nitrogen and phosphorus concentration, causing the formation of algal blooms, leading to a decrease in the amount of light coming into the water. The rate of photosynthesis will slow down, therefore the plants will start to die, increasing the amount of bacteria that decomposes these plants. This leads to a decrease in the amount of oxygen as it's used up by the bacteria. Other aquatic organisms such as animals are going to die out due to the lack of oxygen, and the entire area will become a dead zone. 3.2.5 says predict what will happen to the oxygen content of the water if the phenomenon mentioned in question 2.3.2 occurs. 3 marks. What would happen to the oxygen content if eutrophication continues to occur? So as we have mentioned in the previous questions, a similar concept, the oxygen levels will drop. Why are the oxygen levels dropping? Because the rate of photosynthesis has slowed down. So the oxygen levels will drop and there will be an increase in algae. And there will be an increase in the bacteria as well, and the decomposers will reduce the oxygen level. So the oxygen level will drop, there will be an increase in algae, and there will be an increase in the bacteria. And the bacteria will start feeding on the oxygen, and therefore the oxygen level is going to start dropping and it's going to be reduced. That's for 3.2.5, 3 points for 3 marks. The next question, 3.3 says, read the passage below and answer the questions that follow. Despite the great increase in the demand for food, only 7% more land is now used for farming. One of the reasons for this is increased productivity, that is a higher yield per hectare due to GMOs as well as the use of chemicals. In the last 30 years, people have become more aware of the use of chemicals in farming. Some people are concerned about the effects of these on their health and choose to buy organic grown produce. Farmers who use organic methods to produce food do not use chemicals on their crops. 3.3.1 says define the term food security. Notice that this question is taken from the subtopic food security, which was touched on in human impact on the environment. If you are asked to define the term food security, it simply means when all people at all times have access to sufficient, safe, nutritious food that maintains a healthy and active lifestyle. 3.3.2 says state one way in which the use of each of the following helps to increase productivity. We're first going to start with pesticides for 1 mark. How does pesticides help to increase productivity? So pesticides are generally going to be there to help to kill pests. So we could say pesticides kill the pests which destroy the crops. The second one, we are looking at fertilizers. What are fertilizers there for? They're going to be enriching the crops with nutrients. So fertilize increase nutrient content in the soil. 3.3.3 describe how the use of pesticides could destroy food chains for 2 marks. Now remember that pesticides are going to kill pests, but pests are also a step in the food chain. They are one of the levels in the food chain. So consumers could die if they feed on pests that have been poisoned by the pesticides. If the pests are killed off by the pesticide, there will not be food available for the next level consumer. Very, very important. So firstly, the pesticides are going to be killing the pests. And when the pests are killed, there's not going to be food available for the next level consumer. 3.3.4 says explain why GMOs can be considered to be a threat to food security. For 2 marks, what does GMOs mean? We're referring to genetically modified organisms. Can also be referred to as genetically modified foods. So GMOs contribute to the killing of organisms other than pests and pollinators. It can pose a potential health hazard as people have allergies. So people may have allergies to the chemicals that are going to be used and then could obviously pose as a certain health hazard. The next question, 3.4, states one of the challenges in South Africa is access to food by the poor. In 2009, Statistics SA conducted a survey to determine the percentage of households in each province that had access to food. The results are shown in the table below, so you have the different provinces here, the households that have access to food as a percentage. The question says draw a bar graph to compare access to food in Northern Cape, Northwest, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo and Gauteng for 6 marks. So Northern Cape, Northwest, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo and Gauteng. We are only reading these values, we are only plotting the graph for those provinces. If you plot the graph for all the provinces, you will lose marks because the question is specific as to which provinces they want you to plot. The first column is going to be the independent variable always, and the second one will be the dependent variable. We need to make sure we are drawing a bar graph. So the answer to the question will be as follows. We have a heading bar graph comparing the access to food in 5 different provinces. We have our provinces here, Northern Cape, Northwest, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, Gauteng. Those were the ones stipulated in the question. We had the dependent variable on the y-axis with an appropriate scale, and we plotted the points and we had our bars. Remember, a bar graph has spaces in between the bars. The criteria used for the drawing of the graph was as follows. 1 mark for the heading, 1 mark for the correct type of graph. We drew a bar graph. 1 mark for the labeling province and the dependent variable. 1 mark for the scale, if you had a scale here, and last for plotting the points. If your bars were plotted correctly, you add everything together, it gives you a total out of 6 marks. In addition to this, please make sure you are able to draw a pie chart. A pie chart is also a type of graph that can be questioned of you, especially in paper 2 of your final exam. The next question, 3.5, says alien plants such as the water hyacinth ichneumon species have become invasive in South Africa, blocking waterways and reducing water quality. Remember that alien plants are normally going to be posing as a threat to our normal indigenous plants, and they can have major disadvantages on the crops in the farm. 3.5.1, differentiate between alien plants and indigenous plants for 2 marks. So, alien plants do not grow naturally in an area, but indigenous plants grow naturally in an area. You perhaps should have learned that indigenous plants are the plants that are home to our area or home to our country. They are the plants that grow naturally in an area. But alien plants do not grow naturally. They perhaps came from a different environment. 3.5.2, why do alien plants become invasive in an ecosystem? What do we mean by invasive? They take over the ecosystem and they pose as a threat. Why are they posing as a threat? They use a lot of water and nutrients and grow quickly. They have no predators and pathogens. Main reason, they consume lots of water. When the sprinklers are on, they're going to consume all the water and nutrients. And they're going to grow very quickly and rapidly. And when they grow very quickly, they're going to demand more water. And the water is going to be consumed by these alien plants. 3.5.3 state 2 ways that the government could use to control alien plants. This was something you would have learned in the topic, especially when you focus on loss of biodiversity. There were 3 types of control: chemical control, mechanical control, and biological control. Please make sure you know these types of control that you can use for alien plants: chemical, mechanical, and biological control. 3.5.4, describe how alien plants may affect aquatic animals by reducing water quality for 4 marks. How alien plants may affect aquatic animals. What are aquatic animals? Animals that live in the water, river, lake, dam, or ocean, by reducing water quality. So it blocks out the sunlight and plants cannot photosynthesize. This reduces the amount of oxygen in the water and causes organisms to die. Very similar explanation to what we had when we spoke about eutrophication. So when the quality of the water goes down, sunlight will be blocked, photosynthesis will stop, reducing the amount of oxygen, and organisms will therefore die. The next question, 3.1, says some areas in South Africa receive dangerously high levels of UVB radiation. We refer to this as ultraviolet radiation that we're going to receive from the sun. For example, in the R and in the Northern Cape, as shown in the diagram below, study the diagram and answer the questions that follow. So you have your UVB units here, the dependent variable, your years, the independent variable, different years 1995 all the way till 2001, and you either have moderate, high, dangerous or very dangerous UV radiation. The first question, 3.1.1, says name 2 harmful ozone depleting substances. What does this mean? We are referring to things that are possibly going to cause holes in the ozone layer. There were 2 important things that we would have discussed: chlorofluorocarbons as well as hydrochlorofluorocarbons, therefore CFCs or HCFCs. So hydrochlorofluorocarbons or chlorofluorocarbons. Apologies for this numbering, it should have stated 3.1.1. That is the answer for 3.1.1. The next one, 3.1.2, says explain 2 consequences that ozone depletion has on the environment, for 4 marks. 2 consequences of ozone depletion. The answer here should have stated 3.1.2. This answer should have said 3.1.2. It's not 3.1.4. So firstly, it damages the nucleic acids in chromosomes, causing mutations. Secondly, it causes skin cancer and eye cataracts. Thirdly, it increases the water temperature, changing aquatic environments and the organisms that live in them. Lastly, it causes the rate of photosynthesis to slow down. So plants will grow more slowly, affecting production of crops and food for animals, thus increasing food security. 4 possible things that you could have stated, 4 consequences of ozone depletion. Any 2 of these that you would have had correct would have given you 4 marks. Then 3.4, describe the contribution that a farm can have on the growth of algae and the negative impact it has on the aquatic life in water. Once again, we are simply describing the process of eutrophication, and we're starting with the farm. We're going to speak about what the farm actually does. So we know that generally on a farm, you're going to enrich your crops with nutrients that's going to be received from fertilizers. So farms use fertilizers to increase crop production, but the excess fertilizers run off into the river, causing an increase in the nitrogen and phosphorus concentration in the river, which leads to the formation of algal bloom. This blocks out sunlight on the surface, causing the process of photosynthesis in plants to stop, slow down, causing the death to lower plants in the water, causing an increase in decomposition bacteria, which depletes aquatic life. So the fish are going to die out in the water, and the entire area is going to become a dead zone. Please make sure you are able to describe the process of eutrophication. This was a 5-mark question, so therefore 5 correct points to get 5 marks. Lastly, due to low levels of oxygen that are available for cellular respiration. So that is basically why the aquatic life is going to be depleted. The area becomes a dead zone because there are no longer levels of oxygen for cellular respiration to take place. So just a quick recap, the topics that you should be studying for paper 2. Please make sure you are studying the correct topics: biodiversity and classification of microorganisms, biodiversity in plants and reproduction, biodiversity in animals, population ecology. In this video, we revised the human impact on the environment using questions from section B in previous question papers. That brings us to the end of a section where we revise topics for paper 2. Please ensure that you are studying the correct topics for your paper 2, and I wish you everything of the best for your exam.